Okay, welcome back to the Air and Out podcast. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're looking after yourself. Today we're going to try something a little bit different. In the sense that we have an objective, and it might run like a normal episode, but there's something at the end. I want you guys to start participating a little bit, start engaging a little bit more, and make this less about me and include you more in this. I want this to be a two-way thing. I want you guys to let me know how you're doing. But before we get into that, I don't want to go getting ahead of myself. We'll save all of that stuff for later. For now, let me reintroduce myself. Those of you that have seen the podcast before, or at least listened to one episode, know who I am. I'm Sam. And in our 4-month hiatus, roughly just over 4 months, I've changed as an individual. And as Heraclitus says, no man steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man. It's one of my favourite quotes. I've said it on the podcast before, but point being, I'm not who I was in those last episodes. The time has elapsed. Changes have happened for the better or for the worse. I've learned lessons along the way, whether it's through mistakes, failings, successes, or just stumbling across things where I learn a little bit more about myself. So today I wanted to go over some of those things. What are some of the things in the +4 month hiatus that I have learned which have made the biggest impact on me, and how I take them forward now in my everyday life. So let's get into it. So number one, a little bit of context. This was in the thick of my slump, I want to say, post getting laid off. The horizon of the podcast as it was taking a decline. We were getting into all the kind of legality of the things, and I was lacking direction, and I didn't know what the hell to do with myself. I'd just been laid off with a job, so it was like, what the fuck do we do now? So I was struggling, and because of my history with mental illness and particularly anxiety, my first method of defense, or at least offense in this regard, was to think about it, try analyze it, break it down, understand what we need to do, look at everything and kind of figure out, think about and solve this as if it were a puzzle. Like, there's a problem to be solved. Let's think of all the different ways that we could do it, go through all this, try this, try that, try this, try this, try that. And then one night on a way to a comedy show, the first ever comedy show that I've been to, it was a very low-key one, a very stand-up one. It was a stand-up comedy show. And I went with James, who is a good friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, who loves comedy. And it was on my way to see him that I was listening to a podcast, and I heard a guy who was a former police officer who turned into a therapist, and he spoke about having an intellectual response to an emotional problem. And when he said that, it's like something clicked. I thought, oh, that's exactly what I'm doing. I've got this thing which is kind of feels fundamentally wrong, or there's something which isn't right. And I'm trying to use my head, I'm trying to figure it out, I'm trying to calculate, I'm trying to analyse, I'm trying to solve this problem. The puzzle, as I mentioned. Then, I just need to figure out how to fit all the places. That was never going to happen. I was trying to use my head to solve a problem that could only ever be solved by my heart. I've always tried to lead with, you make short-term decisions with your head and long-term decisions with your heart. I'd become so misguided in how I felt in this slump that my instinct was to let my brain take over and do the thinking and do the figuring out. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing, but I learned that the heart is the true compass. So what I did from that day on was I forgot everything, forgot all the stuff that I'd been writing down, meticulous note making and reflecting. I just sat myself down, found some quiet within me, shut off my head, got it, and just listened to my heart. And I asked it, what What happens? What do I do now? And I actually do remember what it said, because it really fucking confused me. I sat down and I kind of brought all of these problems and this discontent to the fore, and I said, what do I do? And yeah, my heart said, do what is right. And so for the next few days, I was thinking, what the fuck does that mean? What do I do with that? Anyway, a few days later, I came across a concept called ikigai. I hope that I'm pronouncing it correct, because that's how I'm going to continue with it. But ikigai is this Japanese way of understanding what your true meaning and your value will be towards your life and what you can contribute and give back. And as soon as I learned that, I thought, give it a go. Why the fuck not? Just see what's the worst that could happen. And it was fantastic. I actually have it here with me. So I'll explain the concept of ikigai. So you write down, you illustrate 4 circles, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in each of those circles, you have, what am I good at? What do I love? What does the world need? And what can I get paid for? And these circles overlap each other. I didn't have enough space, so I wrote on the outside, what am I good at? What do I love? What does the world need? And what can I get paid for? But it's where these circles overlap that you kind of begin to see these you begin to see patterns. And in between what am I good at and what do I love, that's what you're passionate about. In between what I love and what the world needs, that's your mission. In between what the world needs and what can I get paid for, that's your vocation. And what am I good at and what can I get paid for, it's your profession. So this begins to tell you things about yourself. So you can't lie to yourself when doing this. You have to be completely upfront and honest, because otherwise you're not going to get an authentic and true response to you. So as much authenticity as you can. And it's where these circles overlap that you really get the meat of what ikigai can do for you. And in the middle, where all 4 circles overlap, is your ikigai. And this gave me direction. It didn't give me the answers. It didn't give me the solution to my problem, but it gave me direction. It pointed me to where I needed to go. In doing ikigai, I was able to underline everything that meant the most to me, and put that in the context of what I can contribute towards the world. So in the same vein of the authenticity that you have to do in order to get the best result from ikigai, you can't just do that with your head either. You have to get real with yourself. You have to find out what deep down in your heart you love, what you're good at, something that you can apply to the world and something that you can do as a profession or a vocation. So again, it's not just having that intellectual response. You can't be completely true to yourself if you're just thinking, because your mind's calculating towards what can be optimized towards you rather than what's true towards you. So this was really fantastic. And if you're stuck or you're not quite sure what to do, or you think that the path that you're on at the moment isn't quite the one that you feel like you're meant to be on, then give this a go. I mean, even if you are set, like if you have your dream job and you're doing everything right, and if everything feels in place, give it a go anyway. See if what is in the center of your ikigai is what you're doing right now. I mean, it's a fun, interesting experiment that I think has very little downsides for all the upsides that it has. So yeah, having an intellectual response to an emotional problem and ikigai. So not having the answers to all of these big questions that I was asking myself got frustrating, and it was annoying because I wanted the answers. I didn't want to be sat at home as much as I was. I didn't want to be rattling through my mind. I didn't want to be kind of adrift. So I was hard on myself. I wanted these things. I wanted to try and get myself, okay, let's move forward. Let's get this done. Let's know what it happens next. Let's know what. And it was very tiring. So I started to learn, which is number 2, to give myself a little bit more grace, to not be so hard on myself. And I know that is so much easier said than done, but it's one thing to want to do well. It's one thing to want to progress, to move forward, to succeed. But sometimes you just gotta pump the brakes and be okay with pumping the brakes. Since I've started wanting to change things around in my life, it's always been very much forward progress, perpetual movement, never stopping. We achieve a good goal, there's another one, keep moving. But this has been, learning to give myself grace has been about stopping, taking a moment and being like, we're okay. You're doing all right. You don't have to be perfect. I've said it multiple times on the podcast. I'm not perfect, but when you fuck up, when you make a mistake, when you don't do something right, when you don't meet somebody's expectations, when you've been too busy, or whether you're worn out, or if you just feel like absolute shit, that's okay. That's okay. You get another chance. Tomorrow will come. The sun will rise again. But you don't have to run yourself into the ground trying to compensate, make up, please, meet expectations, or undo something. Sometimes it's okay just to accept how things are at the moment, just letting them be. You love something, let it go. You know, and a part of that has helped me realise for the first time that I am enough. Like I've wanted to try and learn what that means. I've never been able to accept it. I've never been able to realise it, believe it, or see it. But it was when I started giving myself grace, taking that time, accepting things as they are, even if they're not in the best circumstance. So at the end of that, when you arrive at that point of grace, I was able to say to myself, right now, where I am, how I feel, I'm enough. I'm enough where I am. I don't have to be living 100 miles an hour. I don't have to be relentlessly pursuing something. It's okay just to be. Giving yourself grace. Number 2. So in learning to give myself grace, I also learned something which actually had quite a radical change in me. It was noticeable physically and mentally within myself, and other people noticed it. They said that I seemed lighter, that it was almost like I'd shrugged something off of my shoulders, like some weight off my shoulders. And I learned it from a reel on Instagram, from Dr. Gabor Mate. And he said in an interview about how if he went back and changed things, what would he change? He said he quite radically changed a massive part of his life. But he said he wouldn't spend so much time in hospital being a doctor. He wouldn't have missed all of his kids' birthdays or any of his anniversaries. But he basically says he wouldn't have done this if he didn't feel like he needed to validate his existence. And that hit me like a fucking freight train. Because like I've said, ever since I have started this road to being a better self, it's very much been, let's make as much distance as we can from the person that we were, because that was the worst that things could have possibly been. So let's make things better. But that making things better becomes a bit of a perpetual cycle that doesn't stop. Like I mentioned with the previous ones, it's never-ending goals that multiply. You reach one, you gain two more. It's the forever march towards your expectations and your dreams. And so much of, although my life has been better, I have given myself so many more tools and skills and knowledge and experience from that point where I started. If I asked myself how much of that time I truly enjoyed, how much time I spent for me, how much time I just spent chilling out, I wouldn't be able to come up with very much for you. Because I felt like I needed to validate my existence. I felt like I needed to justify my position on this earth. I felt like if I didn't do everything all the way, then this second chance at life would be squandered. It was almost like I had a debt to pay. I don't know who it was for. I don't know who I was validating it for. I don't think I was doing it for anyone else. I certainly wanted to make my parents and family proud and do them right for all the help that they gave me through when I needed it. I think most of it was for myself. I had this second chance and I didn't want to waste it. There's so much of that time moving forward is miserable. It was enduring. I didn't do it because I wanted to do it. I felt like I had to. So once I realised that I didn't have to I did not have to validate my existence, I began to live more lightly. I was smiling more, I was laughing more. When my mum and nan said, you're smiling more, like you seem different. And I felt different, because I didn't have to prove myself to anyone or anything. I was allowed to simply be, to just enjoy things for the sake of enjoying them. And that's been something so, I know it sounds so strange, but it's been something so foreign to me for so long. Don't invalidate your existence. Don't validate your existence. So to just round off not needing to validate your existence, I basically found out that I don't need to be the person that I think that doing all of this stuff will make me. I don't need to be the person that I want to be tomorrow. Again, because who I am today is enough. Who I am today is good. People still love me. I love me. Yeah. Sometimes I struggle with that one, but I do. That's all right. So, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say about validating my existence is, once I let go of this need to always be striving to be the person that I wanted to be, or the person that I thought I needed to be, or the person that I'm not yet. It sounds so simple when you say it, but I was just allowed to be who I was there and then. I was allowed to be in the moment. I was allowed to enjoy things for the sake of enjoying them. Yeah. I was allowed to be me, not the person that I wanted to be. And you wriggly little boy. And then that being me was enough. And it was nice. It was so nice. Shirking all of those expectations and all those pressures and just being me, like a dog. You don't ever worry about any of that stuff, do you? You're just you. You don't worry about being anybody else. Oh, to be a dog. God, too. You porky boy. I think we're just going to carry on like this. Are we? Careful. Smooth. Yes. It's like. Nice. What? Got to work with him. So the last thing that I learnt, or that had a lasting impression on me, was the difference between self-acceptance and self-improvement. I made a point at the start of this year to try and accept myself, accept the way that things are, not that the way that I think things should be or could be. We do. See you later, buddy. I wanted to just be who I was. I wanted to accept who I was and the way that things are. On the front of one of my books, it has a quote. I'm paraphrasing like a motherfucker, but you should hope for things to be... No, you should hope for things to unfold as they are, not how you wish them to be. And it was... I spent about the first 7 months of the year learning to accept, learning to be myself. What do you want? What do you want? And the last one that I wanted to briefly touch on was finding balance between self-acceptance and self-improvement. You know, I mentioned that I've spent so many years working towards improving, optimizing, making better, that it got to a point where I said I have to learn to accept things, accept myself. The world around me, that's not quite as hard to accept. But internally, because of the patterns and the foundations and the routines that I'd laid out and the self-defense mechanisms, that was a lot harder. But change needed to happen. So at the start of the year, I set off on a little bit of a personal crusade of self-acceptance. But what I learned was, although I learned some incredibly valuable lessons that I'm going to be taking with me for the rest of my life about how to live with myself and be okay with the way things are and the way and who I am, I learned that in this lifestyle of self-acceptance, I wasn't really going anywhere. I'd resigned the self-improvement, the progress, the march forward, the continual, perpetual movement. But what that had meant is that I was feeling quite stagnant. I accepted the way things are. I learned to love more. I learned to give love more and just kind of be happier with the way things are. But that didn't mean that things were still kind of going forward. So I wanted to find a balance. I thought, this isn't right. This isn't kind of my nature. My nature isn't one of self-acceptance alone. I need to find somewhere in between the two. For many years it was one. Now I've learned the other. Now I have to find a middle ground. Because being on one side of both extremes it's not how I will function. It's not how I'm going to work. So I've been kind of getting back on the horse of self-improvement, setting myself some goals, working towards some things, being a little bit more ambitious, challenging myself more, pushing towards things, getting out of my comfort zone, while also sternly carrying with me those lessons of self-acceptance, that it's okay to fall over, it's okay not to get things right, it's okay to, at the end of the day, if you feel like shit, to just say, still, no, cool. And that balance is what I've learned, and it has been a massive impact. A crucial lesson that I've learned. So remember all the way back at the start of the video how I said we have an objective with this episode. Things are going to be different. Phase 2, baby, it's happening. What we were talking about was we want this to be about us. So I don't want this podcast to be about me. I never wanted it to be about me. Sure, I've got to share some of my stories or share what's been going on about me, but ultimately it's about creating that community. It's about bringing people together, and how we want to make that happen in phase 2 is by getting you guys involved, by getting you to become part of the show. And you must be thinking, oh, the fuck has he got planned for us? But in order to make people's lives together, in order to improve the lives of people around us and know how to have those positive impacts, I think that it's important that we work together. We bounce off of each other, and we create a community within ourselves that we can spread outwards, and then pass along those positive messages and impacts to other people and just go, sure. But while I'm the guy on the screen, I'm the one doing this, I can't do it alone. I need your guys' help. And that help, for now, comes in the form of engaging with us, writing in. And so all the things that I've been talking about today, we're going to leave somewhere that you guys can contact us, that you can reach in, whether you'd like to do it anonymously or if you'd like to leave a handle or I think is it a pseudonym? Basically a writing name. Or just leave your email. Doesn't matter. The point is, what I'd like for you guys to do is to write in, basically tell us, how have you been in this time which has elapsed? So since the last episode of the podcast, Dave's interview number 2, since that time, how have you been doing? Like, how has life been treating you? What are the things that you've learned? Much like the ways that I was talking about them, you could write a couple words. You could write a Bible. And how have you changed since the last we spoke? How have you evolved? The world has changed around us, but we have changed one and the same. So please get in touch. Like, I do this thing called Talk Club. I'm a captain for Talk Club, and it's essentially a support group for men, but something that we're a relatively new group, but something that we've noticed the hardest part for people coming is walking through the door. The hardest part, and we're strategizing and figuring out ways to get people to do it, but as somebody who wants to participate, the hardest part is entering that unknown and doing something you've never done before. And that's how this must feel. I appreciate that this is scary. You're of that kind of attitude. Someone else will do it. I don't have to do it. I don't want to do it because I've never done that before, and it's talking about personal stuff. Ugh. But please give it a go. Please engage with us. If we're going to make this happen, we've got to do it together. I'll do everything that I can. I promise that. I can't do it alone. I need you guys to, I don't know, just give it a go. And I'd like, if you're willing to share these things, and in sharing how you have been, that will encourage other people to get involved. And I think the translation of compassion, broken down from Latin, is shared suffering. And although we're trying to not quite look at it as suffering, it's sharing how you're doing, it's sharing how you're feeling. And if we can get people engaging, we are going to create a space for people to feel safe and confident in sharing how they're feeling. And that seems like a very positive step in the right direction, that we can take the podcast and what we can do for well-being. So yeah, here's a couple starters. How have you been? What have you learned? And how have you changed since the last time we spoke? I know it's a lot to ask and it's scary, but I'll go on, give it a go. I might write in anyway. I know but I might write in anonymously and share that on an episode. But hearing how somebody else is doing, I know you hear a lot from me. It's not all about me. Hearing how somebody else who is engaged, who is listening to the podcast, much like you are now, who is actively participating, that can be very freeing. It can be very liberating. It can be, particularly if what you're going through is the same as what they're going through. If you hear a shared story, shared suffering, if you hear that, that's a compassionate response. And that kind of creates that bond. If you have somewhere where you can feel safe and confident to do those things. Yeah. What was that saying? Only you can do this, but you can't do it alone. Maybe that relates. Come on, guys, let's do this. Let's do this together and make the difference. Be the difference that you want to see in the world. Can't do this alone. Let's do it together.